this is my meditation time, where it's just, you know, it's just very physical and very real, and it's just very not, it's very grounded. There's no, with goats and growing food and chickens and stuff, there's no illusions. There's no conspiracy theory, you know, it's just food and that's it. It's just grass, milk. You can't manipulate that with the media. You can't put a spin on this. Like that, those are ducks that are hungry right now, and there's nothing that the New York Times can say about it. There we go. That's to catch grabblers. So yeah, this is the big house. And most of them are outside right now. This is like the college dorm right here. We're just getting them deep into debt so that they lay eggs for us forever. Just young chickens in the prime of their life, just getting them into college debt. This is the gen pop area of the chickens. As you can see, they right now they're pretty multicultural. But as the day progresses, they all break up into little racial units and start working out and playing craps. By the end of the day, it will be full-on gang warfare based entirely on the race of the chicken. Well, the easiest animals to take care of are the ducks. At first, they were the hardest. We had to keep them in our bathtub for like 2 months, and they were messy and stinky and fragile. And I had to dig their ponds for them. But now, every morning, they just wake up and just walk around and just smoke quack. Let's see, the rabbits get out a lot, but that's why we built this enclosure, so they get out only to get in another enclosure. Here's the baby boomer ducks here. Just like the baby boomers in America, they're very entitled but hilarious. They all drive a Buick and they think we went to the moon. Hey guys! The alpacas are awesome for many reasons. Alpacas, their manure is immediately, you can immediately use it in dirt. It's just full of nutrients and they're very clean animals. As you can see, they always go right the same circle. Like they're much cleaner than goats. They pick a little circle and that's where they defecate. But they obviously look like Duran and Duran. They have 80s glam hair. Don't ever touch their hair though. Just like with an 80s band, never touch their hair or they freak out. But they're cool and they're both pregnant. They're both girls right now. Aren't you ladies?
Bad word.
It's not a bad word. Baby boomer's a funny word.
People.
And there's no bad words, only weak words. Because they're not strong. Weak people say them when they're being weak. Like Daddy sometimes when he's yelling at the moon.
Well, when he has to tour, I mean, he definitely like goes in his head. He is writing a lot. He'll seem like kind of off in space, but it's because he's just trying to get his whole set down. He has to memorize the entire set once he figures out what he wants to do. So it's just like a ton of memorization and like usually in these live streaming, it's very just fluid. And you can kind of say what comes to his mind, and there's no like he has to figure out what he's going to talk about and like research it, get an opinion on it. But with the set, it's much more structured, and he has to kind of repeat a similar set each city so that he can really hone it in before a recording.
It's time to stop believing
and let NASA do all that thieving.
I know, it's time to stop believing.
Or deceiving.
They've been caught deceiving.
Nice. So some of the difficulties that can happen when you're booking a tour for Owen is running into the potential for a venue to either cancel or not allow you to book it. We used to work on some roundabout methods for avoiding the cancellation, where we would book the tour and we would have the venues set, and we would even explain to the venues. You might get some emails or phone calls, but we wouldn't announce the venue until like a day or two beforehand. We would usually just sell a certain city, and then we would email the individuals who brought tickets where the window was close enough to the show where it was a lot harder to actually stop the show.
Putting together this tour was extremely difficult because of his, not really so much his reputation, but it's the idea that what Hollywood and a lot of those people want his reputation to be. So I've called many venues on his behalf, being turned down left and right constantly. And it would start off with something as simple as, yeah, we'd love to have you guys, it'd be great, what do you need help marketing, to 10 minutes later I get an email back from the same person, yeah, sorry, we don't want your kind around here. And it was like, your kind? I'm confused. It doesn't make a lot of sense that, you're basically just openly turning down money. And a lot of these venues, we're not talking mainstream comedian, comic venues. These are theaters off the beaten path down in middle Georgia, or, other places that you're just like, there's no reason they're going to have a problem. And what they end up doing is they look up, his Wikipedia or something to that effect, and they would make their judgment based on the Wikipedia articles that were locked down by haters of his. So getting the venues together was always a challenge. When we got venues to say yes, it was a matter of making sure that we field the flack that would come from people that wanted him shut down, because those venues said yes, they were getting hate immediately. And then they would come to me and say, hey, we have this going on, or we have this going on. And I would have to, reassure them, it's fine, this is going to happen, forward those emails upstairs so that way it can get handled. And then we can give them appropriate responses back, and just making them feel better and more comfortable with what was going on.
So this time around he was really nervous because he wasn't able to perform his material like nearly as much as he has in the past. When he was, able to do improvs and other comedy clubs specifically more, he was able to just riff and just have way more practice. So this time it's like he has 3 shows and then he records an hour. So it's pretty incredible. And I think if you're not familiar with that process, it would not seem necessarily like that big of a deal. But for a comedian to just do like 3 shots then a full hour special, it's very talented. It's very impressive.
All right, I need a break. Oh, the Illuminati Raps is a big one.
Tell me about your childhood.
I don't know how to describe my childhood. Everybody appeared to be very big, so I was so small. My mom taught children's literature, basically how to make things very simple. And so then my mom stayed home with us, and which is probably why I didn't end up a psycho, because I had an actual mom who cared more about us than pursuing her own goals. But my dad was taught wizardry, and so I got to learn how to play piano and speak publicly, but my mom taught me to be a better person about it. My dad was a college professor who taught wizardry, how to convince somebody of something. He taught persuasion, public speech, mass communication, which I now realize is wizardry.
Persuasion in and of itself isn't bad. Mass communication, you're going to need people to give speeches. It's when it's used inappropriately, or, like you put someone under a spell, that you shouldn't. That's why we say wizardry is bad. So being raised in an environment where you become an expert in it so that you can pick it apart, I think is something that's positive. A lot of people know Owen plays piano, but he also played violin. He was raised in a very academically rich, musically rich environment where he would just practice music all day, and it kind of led to his strong skill set.
First song I learned on the piano, I wrote actually, but the first classical song I learned was Moonlight Sonata, because I've been obsessed with the moon for a very long time. And yeah, I played Moonlight Sonata over and over and over again. I played piano all the time, because after I was Paperboy of the Year, I was a really good paperboy, and then someone stole my bike, so it kind of hurt my paperboying ability. So I played piano more and more, and fortunately I finally wrote a song addressing the bike theft and exactly who did it. I had a summer job working at a bakery, and I was funny. And one guy offered me a job at the Renaissance Festival to be a heckler. And so people threw tomatoes at my face, and I made fun of them. And I learned a lot about comedy and life itself, because it wasn't what someone was, it was what someone had pride in that was their weakness. Where a 400-pound man didn't care if you called him fat, it would be a guy like 20 pounds overweight. And I always found that fascinating. And then my friend wanted to be a screenwriter that I met going to kindergarten with, and so I just went out with him because I didn't have anything else to do. My advisor at college, I was a World War II history major with a focus in the Holocaust. So don't go to college, kids. I mean, I have a degree in World War II history and the Holocaust, and if I just bring up a few uncomfortable facts, you get banned from PayPal. Doesn't matter if you have a degree or not. Anyway, so I went out to LA, and that was a really fun time in our life, because we started a band called That's My Daughter. It was a comedy band with such hits. We had some big hits. And I worked at a restaurant, Japanese restaurant. It was fun. Early life in Hollywood for me was incredibly enjoyable, because all the skills I had been made fun of for in high school were now paying off. The piano, stand-up, stuff like that. I would work as a busboy during the day, and I would meet all these people that I would pick up their plates and clean their tables, and then I would invite them to a show. And so my shows that I would run would be packed. And so I'd always be at the Improv watching comedy for free because I knew the sound guy. And I started my own show at midnight because there wasn't a show at midnight. And so I could pack a room. Like, we'd have more people in the audience at midnight than at the 10 o'clock show. And so a lot of people started noticing that, because it was about community building versus just waiting for my big break. That's why I think I never had to do any of these weird, creepy things in Hollywood, and I missed a lot of that because me and my friends were making our own breaks. Like, I could make a living as a comedian since I was 23, 24. Like, I was still working in restaurants, but I was on the show Punk'd. Adam Sandler put me in a movie very quickly, and it was because I could deliver. I had no connections, no family connections. I was not a part of any Illuminati rituals. I just could deliver, and it was like they needed that. They needed a guy who could put together a show and just be normal, because most comedians were so trolly, so little, so sneaky that they just needed someone to bring the heat. And so I met Adam Sandler through Nick Swartzen, who put me in Chuck and Larry and a couple other movies, and that was incredible because he was always my hero as a comedian. And then Vince Vaughn and Jay Leno and all these guys, and I was repped at the biggest agency while I was still working as a busboy. So like, people would be going to my manager and agents would be walking to the Oscars, because it was right next door to where my restaurant was, and I'd be wearing my apron covered in fish grease, and I just say, we'd be talking, saying what's up, and the two worlds coming together were insane, because I was repped by the biggest people in Hollywood, just because I could get a crowd, I could crush a crowd, people liked me, but then I wasn't from money. I had to pay all my own bills. I was sharing a room with 3 other guys. It was, looking back though, it was very fun. I have no regrets about that time in my life. We were just like in our early 20s, mid 20s, just writing and producing, and the sky was the limit, you know. Anything we could think of, we would just make. And we would have one friend to be an editor, one friend to be, you know, one friend to own a bar, and then we could all come together and write and produce a sketch for no money. And it was right as MySpace was exploding, and I became one of the most viewed comedians on MySpace because of that. And that's kind of where my ability came of just making stuff, like not waiting around. It's like, you want to make a movie, you want to make something, you want to be seen, get on a stage and make people laugh. As much as we complain about the internet, it's like, it offered me an incredible advantage because back in the day, you know, a comedian would send in a tape to someone, and if that person didn't like you, like, you didn't get on stage. And I was there right at the perfect time for the internet, because the internet still was very libertarian, where the funniest rose. And now we can see the backlash to that, where it's all about agendas and censorship and all that. But when I was there, there really was this feeling that anything was possible. One time I was at the Comedy Store, and I was standing in the hallway next to Louis C.K., and he hadn't been passed. Mitzi Shore didn't like his comedy for whatever reason, and he wasn't allowed to go up, and he had already written Pootie Tang, and he was one of Chris Rock's head writers and all that. And I remember just thinking, like, wait a minute, this one idiot's allowed up, and Louis C.K. isn't, just because of the whims of a crazy old lady. And that's kind of how it worked. It was, you know, there were these mafia type people that would run the clubs, and if they didn't like you, you didn't get a spot. And it wasn't, sometimes it was so stupid. It was just like, Louis C.K. wasn't allowed on stage, but yet the door guy was, because Mitzi liked the door guy. You know, and then Joe Rogan would scurry on stage, and Louis C.K. wasn't allowed. I thought that was just very interesting, very unfair, but interesting.
We met, I just remember walking my dog, Honey, one day, and I saw Owen. He was walking around the corner with his dog, Benny, and he was on his phone. We just like ran into each other, and he didn't see me because he was just on his phone. And I was like, oh man, that guy's hot. And I just kept walking. And then the next day or the day after, we saw each other again, but this time he didn't have his phone on him, and we just like collided. Our dogs started to like sniff each other, and we just started talking for about an hour. Just like really hit it off, like a lot of great chemistry. And he invited me to his show at the Improv that next night. And so I didn't know who he was. I didn't follow comedy really, or the entertainment world that much. And I came to his show, and he performed, and he like, at the time I didn't think it was a date, because it was just, I thought we were just kind of like hanging out, but it worked best that way, because I wouldn't have handled it well if it had been labeled a date. It would have been like really awkward. And we just hit it off. We pretty much started seeing each other every day after that, and it just moved really quickly. I think a lot of it was because we were neighbors. It was really easy to just see each other all the time, and so we did. It ended up being like the best thing that ever happened, and it kind of just made me really feel that everything happens for a reason, because any like bad thing that had happened that led up to me choosing to move to California it was just like it all made sense, because I met Owen, and we made these like beautiful children together, and like life has just never been better.
Something was different about her from the very beginning, where I kind of knew that something was changing, and I had to adapt, and it took a while to adapt. I was still in that sleazy Hollywood world, but something was different about her, and it was very real.
The early part of our relationship was very, it was chaotic, but and it just went fast. It was fast and furious. Neither of us, I don't think, were looking for our soulmate at the time. And I think we were almost angry that we'd found our soulmate in such a crazy time for both of us.
We were both in places in our life when normal, you know, milk the goats monogamy, having kids monogamy wasn't really that possible. And she was getting her master's at USC, and I was on a successful sitcom, and it was just like, but deep, deep down, we were still the people we are now. We're normal people.
We both felt a connection to each other that really was able to get us through hard times. But we would fight daily almost. A lot of it was driven by my insecurity with him and other women, which was justifiable. And then his insecurity with me was that I would leave him. He faces confrontation like head on and will get even more like wordy. And I'm the complete opposite. I like draw back, I shut down, I close off. So when we would get in these arguments, which was like daily, we would like, it would be this real bad dynamic where he would want to talk it out and I would just shut down, and it would make him think I was like leaving him. When in reality, I just needed time to think.
I didn't think we were gonna make it at one point, and I'm just so glad we did. Sometimes I feel like Walter's spirit was already there, and he was fighting for us to stay together.
Well, we met in 2012, and then we had Walter in 2016. So we'd known each other for about 3 years before we got pregnant. In between then, we were like living together and got married. So we moved pretty fast, I guess, in some ways. But I guess you just, when you know, and that's kind of how both of us operate. Like, we're very intense. Well, so we had been kind of like letting fate take its course, I'll say, for a few months. And then after a while, I was like, why are we not getting pregnant? And so I started to do like those ovulation tests, and then like the first time I did that, we got pregnant. When we wanted to get pregnant was when we were still kind of crazy. So we would still be having these like explosive fights, like so much drama, and we just really wanted to settle down. And it was something we'd both wanted for so long, but I think when it actually happens, and it's your first one especially, you start to think about all the lifestyle changes you're gonna have. I think I immediately got like concerned over the fact we weren't married, because all of a sudden, like, I never thought it was like a big deal. I was always just like, oh, like I don't really need to be married, like our love is love, blah blah. And all of a sudden I had this like feeling of like what if he leaves me now? Like, I didn't really think it through, so I got panicked, and like I really started to like push like, hey, when are we getting married now? I'm pregnant, when are we getting married?
Yeah, when I found out Amy was pregnant, it was one of the best days of my life. It was wonderful. And I knew I wanted to marry her, but I just didn't really get around to it. I know how stupid that sounds, I just didn't. And but once she got pregnant, I just immediately got a ring and just proposed to her in our kitchen. And it was great. Because I always kind of thought that there was a chance that I couldn't have kids or whatever. I always had this feeling that I was cursed. And the fact that she did get pregnant and we could be normal people was incredible. There was nothing like it.
But I actually ended up going into labor at 38 weeks, which was a shock, because they always tell you your first kid is you're gonna go past your due date. And at the time, Owen was in South by Southwest. It was his last road gig before staying home on maternity leave with me.
I was performing at South by Southwest, this like hipster festival in Austin, Texas, and shooting an Old Spice commercial. And she went into labor early, way early. And it was, I had to get on the first plane I could to get back. When I got on the plane, I just heard, she just started going into labor. And there was complications, and I just prayed for her to be okay.
Walter's heartbeat started to not be regular. It started to decrease a lot, and they, would like reposition me, and it just wasn't helping. So they ended up putting me in the operating room for a C-section. And I remember calling Owen, and he was just getting on the airplane as I was going into the operating room. No, he was just taking off as I was going into the operating room. So when he hung up the phone with me, he was like not available for a couple hours just from flying, and he had no idea what was happening. Like he was just freaking out that he was gonna lose the baby, he was gonna maybe lose me. You just don't know in those situations. So he was just absolutely panicked. And
that was the first time I prayed in a long time, probably 30 years.
And I ended up having Walter by a C-section, and he came out just fine. Didn't have to go into the NICU or anything, and I got sewn up, and Owen got in and saw us in recovery, and we were fine. And then a couple hours later, his mom landed because she had planned to stay with us for a week. And so we got to have his mom's help for that first week of being home with Walter, which was just planned so perfectly because Owen decided to get bronchitis as I was recovering from my C-section. So, I mean, it may have been because he had gone to like some weed show at South by Southwest and wasn't used to smoking, but you know, just everything was poorly timed.
I don't know. I wonder at what point going to Portland you can smell the stench.
It just smells like barnyard up here right now, so we'll know the difference.
For a comic, especially a touring comic, they are on the road. If they're doing a weekend away at a comedy club, they're on the road for sure Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday night for shows. You know, maybe they'd get Thursday and Sunday night off, but like that means they're gone like Wednesday to Monday. He got so burned out and like just started to resent the fact he had to be away. You know, he worked so hard to create a life at home, and then he's just never there to enjoy it. Mm-hmm. So that's, I mean, one of the main reasons why he changed from being a touring comic. And it was his choice initially to kind of pull away from being on the road so much. So he just didn't, he knew like right off the bat, like he didn't want that life and be away from our children that much. So he really tried to he really tried to do more things with, you know, podcasting, just stuff that he could start a career where he could work from home more.
So Owen's podcast, Why Didn't They Laugh, began in LA, and it began as an audio podcast, and it was taking sets that he did live and going over the success or failure of a joke and why not. I think the very first episode was about Caesar salad, and whether he, you know, yelled, you know, Caesar, all he got was a salad, or he just said it quietly, whether, you know, which of the two would give a bigger laugh or how you get a better reaction. So it was very much about the engineering and mechanics of comedy. Shortly thereafter, he started to record videos because he'd also want to show the recordings of his sets. And that eventually, he continued on doing that, but then he would also begin to live stream where he would interact with people in the chat and discuss comedy and also do bit writing and things of that nature.
Hi, welcome to another episode of Why Didn't They Laugh? I'm your host, Owen Benjamin. Today we're going to do a real quick episode. It's more like why did they laugh and why wouldn't they laugh now? I was going through my YouTube page, and I'm really digging YouTube these days. I didn't really do it very much for a while or promote it or anything, and now I'm starting to realize that there's a very cool community on there. And I was looking through my old videos, ones that I just put up randomly and kind of forgot about, and there was one that got almost 100,000 views. It just says Owen Benjamin Stand-Up. And I was like, wow, that's a lot of views. It's a lot more than I get now. I wonder what the jokes were. And I rewatched it, and it was put up 4 years ago. And I thought about whether or not these jokes would fly now. And I'm not going to play the whole clip, but I'll play you the end part of it. And I not only do I stand behind these concepts, I think they've become weaponized. Check this out.
Yeah, right? And they won't, even me saying this, like, I just saw a ton of dudes just be like, and they still won't buy it. They're like, oh no, he's doing something with that. It's very complicated, man. Girls think I'm mysterious. I can't be more obvious. This is it. You want to train a guy? Girls are always like, how do I get my husband to do what I want? He's always so like doing his own things, plays video games, watches ESPN, all that. Okay, treat him like a dog. We are dogs. We are simple, we're happy, and we want to serve you. I swear to God. If you want us to take out the garbage, don't yell at us, because then we'll pee on the bed. Fuck that. No. What you do is you encourage us like you would a dog. Who wants to take out the garbage? What? You're so good at taking out the garbage. I'm good at this? No fucking way. Oh my God, you see how good I am? Like we're 9-year-olds. Look at how good I am. Look at what I just did, Mom. I just put it in the garbage can. So good.
From 2008 to 2009, everything changed. And it didn't really hit me. It It didn't really hit me until 2012, but you know, Zach Galifianakis was doing jokes. It was all about rebellion back then. It was all about, like, you could say anything on a stage. If it was funny, it worked. And looking back, I can always see there was a leftist agenda, but back then you still could say anything. Like, I was doing a joke about Jimmy Fallon getting AIDS. You know, Galifianakis he had this whole joke about, like, he's like, I would never call someone a sand nigger. Except, of course, when I'm at the beach, I say, get off the sand, nigger. Volleyball's a white man's sport. Like, that's an A-list movie star doing that joke. And then it got to the point where within 4 years, because that joke isn't full of hate. And then, like, 4 years later, no one can say anything. And it was just like comedy became a mouthpiece for political correctness, which is by definition a contradiction, and it can't possibly work. And so on Sullivan and Son, because it was produced by Pete Billingsley and Vince Vaughn, you know, Billingsley's a little kid from A Christmas Story, and we fought political correctness as much as humanly possible, but you know, in the end of the day, it didn't last. But it was their #1 sitcom, and they still axed it because it was too right wing. And so at that point, I saw all of Hollywood change, and it went from being like what I consider free spirit to straight up evil, where it was about children, and it was about, you know, it's one thing if it's like, they're just idiots, just being like, oh, you know, save the rainforest. It's been burning for 40 years. But now it became like, we want your kids, you know? And as someone who had just had a kid, I was like, we need to get out of here. We need to retreat to where we have family.
So I felt too far from my family up here, and he felt too far from his side of the family in New York. And then we had Walter, and then we were raising him, and then we were both just like, number one, our lifestyle is too expensive to maintain, with me not working, and then two, like, it just wasn't a good area to raise a baby. Like, at the time we were living in like this amazing condo. It was 2 stories and in like a totally secured building in what was considered a nice part of Los Angeles. And but it was just not kid friendly. We had no family help, and there was homeless people, you know, even in this like nice area of Marina Del Rey, there was like homeless people yelling at you when you like go to the grocery store. And so we wanted to get out of that, and Owen was way more in tune with that than I was. At the time, I was pretty cool with just staying there because I enjoyed the sun and, you know, being able to walk to the beach and all that. But I really trusted his instinct to get out of there. Neither Owen or I were raised in a big city, so we wanted to just bring him back and have him experience more of a childhood we did, raise him close to family. We chose Saranac Lake because Owen's brother lives there with his young kids, and we just thought we thought it would be awesome to raise our kids together, and it's a really beautiful small town, so we just thought it was the right move, you know, get away from the homeless problem and the very expensive lifestyle. It would be a lot of financial stress if we would have stayed there, because it was almost like an unsaid thing that I was gonna raise Walter and no longer work. So
I did a big Facebook post that got a lot of traction about how the beauty of the internet is you can live anywhere and still be in this industry, and I got a lot of love for that. You know, I remember that one dude from like Hot Tub Time Machine and all those movies, Craig Robinson. He came up to me like a year later and was like, man, I read that Facebook post. It was so beautiful, man. And I was like, thanks. And that was the response. It was more like, you know, we have family now. I want to be close to family. I'm not turning my back on entertainment. I was still rep by CAA. I was still, you know, rep by Principado Young. I was still working. I still had development deals. I still, you know, but I just wasn't there anymore.
Since Owen's primary gig is a comic and they tour, you effectively have managers who will set up shows for you. So where you primarily live when you're a touring comic isn't that much affected by, or rather your career wouldn't be affected by where you live. living in LA where the majority of things are shot, if you want to be on a show or a movie, that obviously is a lot easier for geographical purposes, but also you're running in and hanging out with people in that sense. But in terms of Owen being able to be a stand-up comic and go do shows wherever, he can live anywhere.
A lot of people were like, what are you thinking? Like moving away from Los Angeles. That's like what kind of everyone was like, what are you thinking? We wish we could do that. No, but no one had like the balls to. It worked out because most of his next year was already booked for being a touring comic, so he could just tour out of New York. So we just moved, and it was a very smooth transition. He had a podcast going at the time and could just record it from home.
My mom and brother were very happy. My brother had been pushing a long time for me to come back. My dad was disappointed that I wasn't going to get more accolades and more. I had a book publishing deal with Norton, which is one of the premier publishing companies. I sold a book to them for $60,000, just an idea. They published Moneyball and all of Michael Lewis's books and Guns, Germs, and Steel and all that stuff. And so when I lost that because of the controversies, and I thought my dad was not happy with me. He said that I should have played ball. And so that aspect of going home was very disheartening, that my dad was disappointed that his son wouldn't be, eating dinner with the kings and the queens anymore. But my mother and brother were very, very happy.
The first time I remember hearing him get a lot of flack for what he said online was when he criticized Beyonce's Super Bowl performance, saying, because it was like a total Black Panther thing, and he was like, well, this isn't cool, we don't do like white pride at the football, at Super Bowl. So I just remember him getting like so much flack, and that was when we were still living in Los Angeles, and I think I was pregnant, but he got a lot of heat, and I remember his manager like saying like, oh, you shouldn't say that. And of course, and it's like when you tell him he can't say something, it's like, what? Like that's when I'll start to like really like dig in. So, but at the time he was still wanting to preserve his relationships with his team back there, so he wasn't so quick to pull a trigger. So he did try and reel it back in. In a way, even though people had an online personality, it's not as big as it was, or as it is now. So people were, at least from my point of view, still being more real than they are now. I feel like people have really lost their self.
I think part of the reason I could see LA a lot clearer after I left was my life wasn't there anymore, and I could really see through a lot of the smoke. Right. Which is probably, I think that's why they're scared of people leaving, is it's almost like seeing a club during the day when it's just sticky and gross. You got to see it with the neon lights or else people get scared. You're going to realize that the club that you just spent $80 on to impress a girl is disgusting. Hey, what's going on, guys?
Yeah, how you doing?
Owen.
He's like, hey, well, Owen right there.
Hey, oh, no way. That's awesome, dude. Good to see you, man.
I'm introducing them to Owen Benjamin tonight.
Yeah.
Sweet.
So he's like, hey, you want to go see a comic show? Yeah. Like,
it'll be a fun one.
Right, it's a little bit different.
It's really not. It's like what comedy used to be. It's not
right.
like this nonsense now,
Right.
Well, I'm going to give them the lowdown, when we go have a drink.
Yeah.
So, yeah, absolutely. But
so what you need to know before an Owen Benjamin show, that kind of thing.
It just laughs.
Yeah. How you doing? Hi.
What's going on? Hi. Hi. Very nice to meet you. Come on in, guys. You guys can grab beers and stuff.
This big nasty beer. We don't need to document this thing. I lost a bet. Let's take it. You bet.
How do you feel, man? About what? Being on the road?
Yeah, you stoked?
Oh yeah, I haven't been on stage in a while, but hopefully and it's all new, so. Hey God, what was our last tour? December? Yeah, most comics are up every night,
I was Vancouver.
because they just stand. You know, and then I get obsessed with giving them more things to stand on. You know, pallets, anything. I just throw stuff out there and they're like, meh. And I'm like, and they're like, meh. And then they just jump on it. And that's it. And that's the secret to life, you know? It's like, they're just standing on that. Every hill is a hill to die on when you're a goat, you know? And then another goat comes over and they're like, nah. And then they violently headbutt each other. And I'm like, ah. And then I just keep stacking stuff. And now I'm getting nervous. The only real fear in my life is that I've created this goat Tower of Babel situation. And they're just up there and I'm just like, ah. Yeah, I know I'm doing joke topics that are a little odd, but I'm trying to do stuff that Dave Chappelle can't steal, so.
He says his cat is trans because of all that soy. He's a soy boy. He's a soy boy. His odor is soy. His opinions are soy. He's soy-cum-sized. And he's always pissed because he's a socialist. And he's awful to be around. All right, guys, I'm Owen Benjamin. Thanks for coming out. One more time for the Redmond family, Paddington Bear, all the Bears. I love you, Portland. Thanks for coming out.
Playing for home crowd is something I didn't used to experience as much. When I do club comedy, there'd be so many people there that just had kind of heard of me but wanted to just laugh, so I had to win them over. Playing for a crowd that knows me that well is definitely interesting. I didn't want to let anybody down because usually I have so much time to practice jokes on crowds I don't care about, that when you really care about a crowd and you know a lot of people travel to come see you and stuff, it's like I really didn't want to let them down, and so there's an incredible amount of pressure.
One of my favorite moments was the roar of the crowd when I introduced him in Portland, because I mean, you assume people are going to enjoy the show. They bought tickets, they're there, it's sold out, like, you know it's going to go well, but you never really know, and you don't know if the jokes are going to go well and all that. But once he did that first joke after having such a great response to him coming out and being on stage again, I think that was notable, that he was able to kind of get in the gear of it.
When Kyneton first introduced me, I was definitely a little emotional. And when the first joke got the first laugh, it was incredible relief. Because, you know, it was all so new. There's nothing more humble than being behind a goat's ass. You know, it's just like, the love you get from a stage is humbled immediately from just sitting right behind a goat, just milking them. There's a little cat and mouse game we have with Gary here. Gary sneaks in about 50% of the time, and then we just bring Gary back. But Gary won this round. Good job, Gary. Yeah. Gary can always sneak in and get a little treat. I respect that about Gary. Part of me hopes he wins sometimes. Now I'm back in my head. I mean, this is gonna be when I need the most decompression, is when I'm like trying to rewrite things. And like from the last show, I can't figure out if the songs didn't work or if people couldn't hear them. So I got great feedback with the stand-up. I know what jokes I have to tweak and which ones work, but you know, I want to write another relationship song. There's so many couples come to my show that I really want to write something about men and women. Yeah, the encore definitely caught me off guard, because I just remember thinking, what else do I got for these people? And then I thought about my bike.
So we were living in Saranac Lake, and Owen was really involved on Twitter then. That was his main outlet for posting, and I just remember one day he was in his office, and really, I could tell he was stressed out because he was really quiet and focused and not really moving from his computer. So I was like, oh man, like something bad's happened, because he usually gets like that when, you know, it's not necessarily the best news. And I'm like, what's going on? He was like, well, people are, you know, really coming at me because I've said, you know, this guy shouldn't put his kid on hormone blockers. And I was like, why? Because I was like pretty new to everything. He was like, oh, you know, it's a 3-year-old kid, you know, it's like child abuse, or like putting him on hormone blockers so he doesn't hit puberty.
There are no trans children. That's just insane. I mean, there's really no trans anybody. It's a mental illness. And when and this comes from someone who had a transsexual piano teacher. Like, I learned how to play piano from a transsexual. Like, I'm not ignorant or hateful when it comes to these people. Like, my transsexual piano teacher taught me how to play Moonlight Sonata when I was 9. But children don't have the mental capability of saying any of these things. They can't drink, they can't drive a car, they can't vote, but yet at 5, they can say what gender they think they are, and then face irreparable consequences, and then enter a group of people that has a 40% suicide rate. So I kicked the hornet's nest on that, because there was this guy named Jesse Thorne who worked for NPR, real hooked up, and had said that his son was really a girl because of the way he acted at 3. I was very vocal about my opposition to that. And then the next day, my agent and manager both dropped me because I wouldn't apologize or go back on what I said.
To really dot all the I's and cross all the T's, because Jesse Thorne had mentioned that it was something that they would come across and discuss as a family, and that it would be a possibility. Now, I think he also said in a tweet that, there is a age where it's too young. So where things get tricky is if you don't believe in transitioning a child at all, then there's no age limit really. Because the argument is an adult's an adult, they can make whatever decision. And then you can also try to define the line of when is somebody old enough to make a life-altering decision, for the rest of their life. Like, you can't rent a car until you're 21 or 24 or something. 25, yeah, so exactly. So at 18 legally, I suppose, you could transition, or maybe even earlier. So anyway, so the point was, he was taking issue with the fact that it was a 3-year-old boy who is being treated as a girl, and that they were in the process of transitioning, which would or could include hormone therapy. And Owen was saying all of that process was abuse.
He was like, well, all these people in Hollywood are saying I'm like transphobic and like blah, blah, blah. And then I was like, well, if he's getting a lot of heat online and, all these people are after him, I was like, I guess you should just, reel it in. And at that point, I didn't really understand the need to take such a strong stance and stick to it. But he just had that that he was like, no, this is like very detrimental if we allow this. And I was like, okay, keep going. I'm like, but it's really affecting you, you're really stressed out. And I was like, is it really worth it, to care about something that's miles away?
I understand why people cuck and take a knee and go with the devil, but I couldn't do that. Vox Day was talking about that. Someone said that me and him have so much courage, and he said it's not even necessarily about courage. It's about like some men are incapable of cucking to that degree, where some men would be like, well, I have to do it for my family. You know, I have to be able to make a living, so I'm going to go along with this stuff. And I'm not capable of that. I was like, that's child abuse. That kid is going to, it's a coin flip if that kid kills himself when he grows up. Because at 3 years old, you can't do that. And there's certain types of men that are like, you can't abuse your kid in public like that and have me sit here. And all the people that were trying to shame me, all the Hollywood people that were like, oh, I can't be associated with you anymore. But I'm like, that tactic not only didn't work at me, I would point my finger at them and say, you're sick. Like, you're on the wrong side on this thing. And it destroyed a lot of my friendships with Hollywood people because, you know, they would publicly say like, oh, Owen's lost his mind, Owen's all this stuff. I'm like, no, I haven't. That's a 3-year-old child.
It was pretty nuts. Not many people came to his defense that he really thought would. And it was, I think, a eye-opening moment for Owen. I think that's when he realized the direction society was heading.
And then Joe Rogan had me on to talk about it, and which I gave him a lot of love and tremendous respect and leeway because he did that, because it was such a cool thing of him to do in my book.
One of the things that Joe Rogan is famous for, or infamous, was the confrontation with Carlos Mencia. And within, as it's been explained to me, within the comedy community, he was looked at as a hero because he was lending a voice to those who didn't have a voice. A lot of comics were suffering from the joke stealing. They knew that what was going on, but they were afraid to call it out, and Joe wasn't.
But he's also a gatekeeper. Like, his whole role is like when a man is about to leave the plantation, Joe Rogan brings him in, you know, tells them what they want to hear, and then gets them back on the sodomy train.
When you go against the powers that be, or you somehow cross some line, and gatekeepers will no longer give you access, and you're basically ghosted. They don't talk to you anymore, and you get ostracized again, for lack of a better term. So the reason I told the Carlos Mencia story was because that, for a while, was, you know, Rogan wasn't afraid to go against the grain for the greater good, and that's why he had the hero status. And when he had his podcast and it was doing really well, he could give a voice to people, you know, who otherwise wouldn't have gotten one. So that Owen's situation was exactly that, where, you know, here is all these things that are happening to him, his manager's dropping him, his representation's dropping him, that he was able to go, Rogan was kind of like, hey, you know, come on my podcast, you know, let's let people hear your side of the story, or hear your story. And that fit right in line with what people understood of Rogan.
That to me is almost even worse, because a guy like Joe Rogan knows how evil this stuff is, and he won't really support the opposition to it. He goes radio silence right when you need him the most.
On Owen's last appearance on Rogan's podcast, one of the moments that was notable was when Rogan was bringing up Owen's tweeting. And Owen had a really good way of putting the way that he utilizes social media, because for one, when something's in text form, tone and context is often lost. That's a given. But Owen would do something what he would call idea sonar, and he would put out something controversial, or he'd post a picture, or, you know, he'd say something, and it was in the reaction where you would learn something. And when you're a stand-up comic and you're in a club, you can say something controversial on stage, you get immediate feedback. Did you get laughs? Did you get nervous laughter? Did you get anger? Did you get boos? So similar kind of learning process through social media based on reactions, and there's an expression, you get the most flack when you're over a target. So the interactions that would be the most, it's not really trolling, because trolling, you're purposely trying to upset people. With Owen, it was more of like, oh, there's something here, let me find the comedic element. And one of the best examples, I think, is when he called the UFC gay. which is hilarious now in hindsight. But in the moment, there's, you know, people get upset, and then he just doubled down because he's like, all right, clearly there's something here. So doing those kinds of things that are provocative, even in text form and picture form. Rogan had mentioned that he would call it like manic tweets, and he's like, you know, what's going on? Run your tweets by me was the famous line. And Owen, you know, was kind of pushing back that's, you know, part of his process. And I think that's maybe where some of the disconnect happened, where it was Owen's clearly like, this is, you know, comedy is my art, and I will kind of mine the field of information and, you know, get things that way. And I think Rogan was kind of like, if you don't, this is just me reading between the lines, but if, you know, you have to stop that, otherwise you can't play with the cool kids.
The backlash affected everybody. When you're being attacked by the global media and they're calling you a Nazi and they're calling you evil, I mean, these are people that had just begged me to be at their wedding. You know, that's what made this all so disgusting, is not only did some of them know me, they were like, they would beg for my approval like a month before. And now they're calling me an evil Nazi. You know, Eliza Schlesinger texted me like the next day, you know, like, I just heard from a bunch of writers something about you and transgender kids. Is it true? And I just texted back what had happened. Then I never heard from her again. That was exactly what would happen all the time. And these are people that have no right to judge me or anybody in this situation. And so, and I just felt a coldness, like a distance from everybody. And when the global media is attacking you, it makes people that don't understand how it works, it's very, very scary. Your heart never goes under 100 for like a month. You know, there's everyone that looks at you, you think just read something about you. And so everyone was scared. You know, my brother, my mother, they were out. My dad was a mess because their jobs they thought were being threatened. They didn't feel safe. Like the relationships that they had with people were being affected. So it was intense, and it really bonded Amy and me tremendously, even more than having a child, I think, because I finally knew I could trust somebody, like a woman. And because she didn't, not only did she not even think about leaving me, I felt like she was in the fight from the whole time.
I didn't think it was that big of a deal because I thought he was kind of blowing it out of proportion. Like, I was like, oh, this can't be that bad, you know, it's just another squabble. But then when I saw how quickly everyone dropped him, and then all of a sudden there was no more tour dates in the future, it was really intimidating. At the time, my concern was, you know, it was primarily just losing the gigs, because I wasn't really sure how we were gonna go about, you know, making up that money. We were living a lot less lavishly, so we had some room, you know, to let go of some income, but it was still a little intimidating because I had quit my job and we'd really kind of moved away thinking Owen could still tour, and that was taken away.
Well, I was doing tree work again for money, hauling branches for my brother for 20 bucks an hour. And then I would rewrite children's books for money. Like, you know, The Giving Tree, I made The Trading Tree. I made it about how if you just didn't cut down the tree, you made more money. Yeah, I just started building my YouTube because it wasn't as controlled as the Hollywood world, because no one would hire me. It was like, bam. You know, blackballing is very real. You know, all that time of like building up an audience, building up a talent that is very rare. And so then I started, you know, I didn't back down. They wanted to cuck me, they wanted to make me scared, and I just went even harder on Twitter. And when I'd be attacked, you know, people would put a little bear icon in their name or their tweet to let me know that they weren't a troll. And that's when the bears started rising.
When Owen began live streaming his podcast, he would have, you know, like his regulars. the term fan doesn't fit. Supporters is probably the best way of naming it. And he mentioned that there was a discussion during a stream about how things in the world, how they just get so crazy and they can seem unbearable at times. And being a comedy community that's big on puns, you know, they kind of took on the community took on the nickname Unbearables, and then individuals would just pick a bear name based on some, well, it could just be a random name or some characteristic. If somebody, you know, was like a farmer, they'd be Farmer Bear, or just real creative, funny names. And so that became the community support group for Owen. And then on Twitter, things, you know, especially when you're having a Twitter battle, which sounds like a silly phrase, but when you're in the midst of a back and forth, and other individuals are jumping in, it became easier to identify individuals who were essentially on Owen's side. They would put a bear emoji next to their name. And as we do with many things, making them funny and funny puns. On Twitter, to get the blue check mark is called being verified. So to get a bear emoji, you would be bearified.
Slowly, we were seeing how all the machines, everything was slowly turning on him, and then it was a trip because we were watching it in real time. We didn't know like why this guy was getting hammered so hard just because he said, you know, that transgender children, you know, that's child abuse because you're imposing or you're forcing your child to be a certain way, which is batshit crazy.
I remember like one day he was just playing at the piano and he was just like, there's 100 people watching me live right now. He was like, this is so cool. He was like, they're just watching me here. And I'm like, whoa, really? Like you're just in your office and they're just watching you. So I just remember it was just like, it was so neat and exciting. And then like the next day he's like, there's 200 people here. And then all of a sudden, when he saw like the first super chat come in, he was just like, this is incredible. Like his mind was just like, in my mind, I was just like blowing up. It's like, how does that even happen? You know, he just turns on his laptop and there's people there. So it was and it was just amazing to see him get so much support because he'd had such a negative experience online and like kind of soul crushing. But he like held strong in it, and then all of a sudden to see these like all these people come out of the woodwork and like just support him, I was so thankful for it because he really he needed the support, and just to know that there was good in the world, like that was the main thing. It was like if your whole community that you live in is telling you that you're wrong and like you're bad for thinking the way you do, but you really deep down and feel that like it's what's good, and you can like really start to feel twisted. And I could see that him feeling that way, but like wanting to stay strong for our family. And so like the bears coming out, even though it was like funny, you know, it's like everyone has a bear emoji, you know, like we call each other the bears. There's like a, you know, everyone has their own name. It's like funny, but it's also amazing because to know that there's people out there who will like back you up online in that like crazy world, it's a very good feeling, and it makes you feel stronger. So it was an incredible transition because I think right before the Bears were formed was like a very low point.
The support I got a tremendous amount of support from people for actually standing up. I didn't realize how many people out there were just waiting for someone in Hollywood to not apologize. And I was their guy. I had no idea those people even existed. And like people would send me letters and super chats and all this stuff, and they're just like thanking me profusely for just not cucking to the monster.
It was cool to see other people believe in what Owen was saying and see the importance of keeping his voice heard. Because I see it, and I think what he says is great because I'm, you know, his wife, I'm in love with him. But to see it reflected on other people, to see how important it is for them was it was really incredible. And I don't think I realized how much of a following he had until they took everything away, and how the Bears still managed to manifest this community and, you know, just make it happen. I was like, wow, like there's a real need for these truths to be said.
At first I was like, oh, cool. And then after a while, I'm like, wow, I can really I don't need Hollywood anymore. And I think it's kind of biblical, where it's like, you have to be able to walk away in order to see that you don't have to walk away.
Most of the interactions with you guys is pretty awesome, but we do have to run into the occasional gamma, and that archetype has been around forever. So we were thinking how funny it would be if it was if social media was around in the time of Noah, and what his channel might, you know, the comment section might look like. So bear with me as I try impressions. I was with you for the first 500 years, but now that you're building an ark, how lame. It took you 100 years to build an ark, loser. I built mine in 50. And then once it actually starts raining, that's not the real reason it's raining for a completely other reason, not the one you said. And then of course, as it's raining, he won't actually let the gammas on. When you check his Wikipedia, he's being criticized for animal discrimination and hearing voices from the sky. And then there's a whole paragraph on the naked drunken incident. I know, it's kind of a biblical joke. That's all I got, so thank you guys.
I'm really fortunate to have a good family. You know, I'm here to remind you guys, have families, get married, have children. Yeah, it's important. And it's not being told to young people enough. You know, a lot of young people, all the media is just, they don't tell you how great it is. And it's also, make sure you get a really good wife that grounds you, you know, because dudes like me, and I'm sure a lot of dudes in here, are a little intense, and so that's when you need your wife to, like, you know, do all the storybook reading and stuff, because I don't know about you guys, but I have great kids, and one of my boys is 3, and so I read to them, but every now and then I'm like, oh, look, it's Charlotte's Web of Lies. And that's when my wife's like, dude, I got this one. It's like Good Night Moon, allegedly. All right, so here's a song that I wrote. I wrote the lyrics, and with you guys is help. And I want you guys to react like it's a real song. And once you realize we might have to start over a few times to really, really hit it. I'm not going anywhere, guys. I got nowhere to be. All right, so when I treat me like I'm like third eye blind. I once saw Third Eye Blind with my wife when we were first just dating, and because she liked Third Eye Blind, and so I'm like, okay, you like it, so I'll get his tickets and we'll go. That's kind of like how she is with like moon landing situations. And so we go, and the dude wouldn't show his face for like 2 songs. He's like, I wish you would step back from the, and he's like, and everyone's like, ah. Okay, I want that. So I'm gonna say like this song, but I'm gonna keep it really vague and like mysterious, and I want you guys to be like, ah, yes, and freak out. All right.
is a song about a rooster. Cock-a-doodle-doo.
What's up, man?
First time, great show.
Oh, cool, brother.
Awesome.
Thank you, brother. That was a fun one. I gotta figure out the closing down. Oh, beautiful. Vermont. My old area. My old stomping ground. Awesome. Hi. Thanks for coming out. Thanks. Thanks for coming, brother.
When Owen was in that phase of like, you know, what do I do next? When he was starting the live streams, at that point, it wasn't so much of, you know, the sky is falling, because he had established, you know, he had worked with his brother and he was live streaming, and then he was like, okay, you know, from now on I'll be self-producing my own specials.
We just took it as like a fight, you know. We were like, well, if you're not gonna let him work, we'll figure out another way and we'll exclude you from it. It's like, good, we didn't want to cut out the manager and agent, you know, 10% each. It's like, now we can book all these clubs if we can find them, you know, and we don't have to pay these guys anymore. It's like, good riddance. So that's kind of, we really tried to keep a positive outlook and just kind of realize, wow, these people are like corrupt. So Owen decided to perform his hour special in Saranac Lake, where we were living, and it's a very small town, you know, where it gets out about everyone knows everyone. But we just really, he really wanted to bring, you know, he wanted to bring honor to the town because he was very proud of it.
It was a town of 1,500. You know, we were members of the community. We were engaged in a church, MOPS, you know, local stuff, supporting. I was doing charities for the police, for everybody. My brother was a big member of the community. And I taped a special there, How Dare Me.
And it was important for a lot of people in the community. We wanted to show them support. So a lot of us planned to travel to Saranac for the taping of the special. He was really generous to a lot of us because he had a house there that he let us stay in, where a lot of bears got to hang out, and you know, it was just a really fun weekend. And then, of course, go to the taping of his special and then hang out with him after as well. Everyone at the special had a great time. It was a warm reception. Owen actually raised money from the special. I believe he gave it to a church. For all intents and purposes, it seemed like it was a great success. We all had a fun time.
600 people showed up in a town of 1,500. You know, it went great. Afterwards, everyone's having beers, high-fiving, great, great, great. One woman who wasn't at the show complained to the newspaper that I had said a word that she didn't like. And someone asked me to meet with this woman to apologize or to work it out or something because she was related to some powerful man. And I refused. And people didn't understand that. They said, just meet with her. No, I wouldn't, because she has no right to do that. She has no right to strong arm me. So then she got the church to turn on our family and give us back our donation. She got everybody to start intimidating my family. They wrote it up in the newspaper.
And the irony about that bit was it probably wouldn't have been in the special to begin with because it was so new. He was even saying at the time, you know, he was going to do it that night but not even put it in the special, not for any other reason other than it was just new.
I get a text from my friend and she's like, yes, so-and-so went and told all the venues that you donated money to not accept it because she's very offended by the content of Owen's show. And I was like, she wasn't even at the show. And she was like, yeah, you know, she's heard through the grapevine like one of the songs. And she was a minority, one of the only people of minority that lives there. So the whole town not the whole town, but like it was split. Half the town was like siding behind her because I think they were too scared to be called a racist. And then the other side took a stance, but it really was like a civil war in Saranac Lake of like what side you were on in this culture war. But she got a really bad article written up in the newspaper regarding Owen. That newspaper article ended up coming up very easily on a Google search or an internet search for Owen. So then it just created such a bad domino effect where if a venue that we were trying to book at later on was looking for Owen, they'd come across the article about from his hometown, you know, saying how he's, you know, racist, bigot, homophobe.
It was very Scarlet Letter-esque. Amy and Owen were in public. You know, there were people who would not be so nice. There was even some crazy lady. Owen likes to cross-country ski, and I think he went out one day with George, and some lady, you know, I know who you are, you know, like he's some monster. It was just a nightmare.
No one ever like threatened us physically there. It was more just a bunch of like middle-class white women being like, like too good. Like you are beneath us for saying that. Like we can't believe you support your husband still. Like it was just not my vibe. So it was, yeah. It was, but nothing. Never felt unsafe. It was more just like, why are we here? Like we don't need to live here specifically. Like why are we here? So that was a good. It was just it put a bug in our ear to leave.
Meanwhile, all the normal people that make society function, the mechanic, all those guys, they like give me free stuff. They'd be like, oh, you're the man, keep fighting the good fight. But the public, you know, the newspaper, the church, the lawyers, you know, these people were trying to make our life hell, and they were trying to make my brother's life hell, so we left. You know, and some people are like, no, stay and fight. It's like, no, the fight is losing. Like, you don't understand. It's like just having a fight there takes away from the whole reason we're there. It was like an hour and a half off the nearest highway. You know, there was no airport. My wife hates the winter. We were there only for family. We were there only because it was a place where we believed yes could mean yes and no could mean no. And as soon as the politics and all that stuff happened, because of one word of a woman that wasn't even there, I'm like, if there isn't the infrastructure here to combat that, to say, this lady, no, be quiet, lady. That's Owen, that's Jason's brother, it's fine. There's no point. Paranoia is what's driving all this. I wanted to tell that town, listen, I'm not here for political power. Like, just stop. I'm just a comedian. Because when you see 1/3 of the population is at my show wearing my shirts and like clapping, everybody is now scared because I would have more political power than the mayor. And I just wanted people to know, like, dude, I don't want any power. I'm not in this for power. I'm here for laughs. And the paranoia, the projection of people that have worked their whole lives to get that kind of a rally, there's no politician that could get a rally like that in that area. Governors couldn't get that rally. So they look at me and they say, that guy could influence an election like that. And so now now everybody's involved. And I'm like, if people would just believe me when I say I'm not ever running for office, I'm never going to try and influence your election unless you're trying to like hurt kids or something. Just leave me alone. And a lot of it is the power. You know, it's the same with like a lot of Jewish people. When they look at me and they say, you're calling out a lot of crimes done by Jewish people, that's going to get us hurt. And I'm like, I will never hurt you, and I will never encourage anyone to ever hurt you people. My entire message is just don't engage in predatory industries. Don't take high interest loans. Don't watch pornography. Don't take Oxy. You know, it's like that. It's not their fault that they sell this stuff. It's just don't engage in it. And just simply pointing out these industries makes these people think that at 1 minute, with the following I have, I'm going to be like, all right, attack, and it's never coming. You know, I'm 39. If that was in my nature, people would have seen it already. Like, I'm not a type of person to sick my dogs on anybody. And one of the biggest things that I've seen is the paranoia and the projection. You know, when people say like, oh, you have thousands of bears, they'll do anything for you. And it's like, the reason they're like that is because they know I'm not going to send them to do awful things. Like, these are some of the most autonomous, sovereign type individuals I've ever met. The reason they follow me is because they know I'm not in it for power. And I'm never going to do that to them or you. And so just leave me alone. thank you. Thank you. One more time for Coddington, huh? Coddington had that idea. He was like, yeah, man, I got the trumpet. And then, like, as this tour went on, he's like, yeah, I got the old-timey shirt. It's going to be great. It's awesome. I love the state of Indiana just because of the city Gary, Indiana. Yeah. It's my favorite name. It's just like, I almost wanted to tell Amy, like, listen, we're moving. It's like, where? It's like, we're going to Gary, Indiana. It's like, why? Because it's named Gary. That's the coolest name ever. Whoever founded that city, everyone's like, what should we name it? Someone's like, Gary. I don't think people understand how wild that is. That's like, where do you live? Gary, Indiana? No, I live in Todd, Ohio. It's just like a dude's name. What's that? You need a bike lock. That's hilarious. When the Jackson 5 left Gary, Indiana, bike theft went down 25%. I got a lot of goats. I'm obsessed with goats. You guys got some goats out here in Indiana? Make some noise if you have animals that you get food from. Couple people? What kind of animals you got? Chickens. Chickens are good. What do you guys got? Sheep. For wool or meat? Meat. Coddington actually slaughtered his first lamb on this tour. He was, yeah, give it up for Coddington for finding out where food comes from. Yeah. Like the first time I slaughtered an animal, it was intense. I'm not gonna lie, it's intense. Coddington was way too cool with it. It was like weird. Like, he just put the 22, it was very, very quick, very professional, but he was just like, yeah, that's cool. The sheep still ghost running, like, and Coddington didn't care at all. He's like, yeah, this is great. I'm like, I'm getting my own room, bro. Like, you're psychotic.
Owen wanted to get me to appreciate where food came from, so he asked me to help slaughter a lamb, and so I did that, and very straightforward process. And then on the first show, he was like, hey, can you go out and do 5 minutes for me? And I was like, can I just slaughter another lamb, please? There is a difference between being funny and being funny on stage. And you don't know that until you have the bright light in your eyes and 200, 300, 400 people in front of you and a microphone in your hand.
The amount of people that came a far distance was jaw-dropping. Like, I didn't even know how to handle it. Like, I just was like, thank you. They're like, yeah, we just drove 7 hours, man. It was worth it. I'm like, I don't know what to say. You guys are just very, very, very good people. I'm like, I hope I didn't let you down, man. But that was definitely a good set. I mean, some of the jokes are starting to click. I felt like this was the most comedy club crowd of any of the shows, where it didn't feel as much like a rock concert, even though you had the encores and all that stuff, but like, that crowd seemed to be there for the jokes, and I really enjoyed that, where it just felt like a comedy club crowd. Like some comedy clubs, there would be people in the audience that almost just wanted to be dicks, or they were like, prove it to me, and these people are like, we're so happy to see you. And a lot of them are in this world, a lot of young men that are going to college, and they see the nonsense, and they're just trying to get through and have what I have with the family. And I definitely feel an incredibly heightened sense of responsibility that I want to make them laugh and not steer them in a wrong direction. Because what Amy and I have, and what people are now striving for, is what people should just do. It's ancient. It's not something I came up with. It's not healing the world like these psychopaths think they're doing. It's just what is. And I think people realizing that they can reject pop culture and reject the subversion and reject the ugly, spiteful nature of our culture and do what they want, that no one's stopping them from having a wife, no one's stopping them from having children, no one's stopping them from speaking the truth, and all you have to do is just do it. I think that people are now invigorated with the challenge, and it's kind of mind-blowing to people that they can just do that. That it isn't this world, like the world that we're presented that's always falling apart in the media, you don't have to buy into that. And I think to see someone with the weaknesses that I have and the vulnerabilities that I have and the Achilles heels, I think the how human I am because of my weaknesses and my spirals and my, you know, inability to do certain things, it actually shows people that it's not an unattainable goal. Like if I can build a fence, anyone can, because I'm not like this HGTV show where everybody's like knows exactly. I'm like, oh, this is how you build a fence, and this. I'm like a struggling dude, and so it's like, oh, you can just don't quit.
The David Hogg situation was here they had a child, a 17-year-old, but legally a minor, on television discussing gun control. And in order to push back on preserving Second Amendment rights and gun rights and all that, to go at the thing that is not the person, but the narrative that's being pushed. Owen will kind of take something head on because he doesn't. There are no sacred cows. He can see what they're doing, creating a shield, and all the things that would come as a result of combating something that you're supposed to be off limits. He's not afraid. He's already faced enough social shame so many times of, oh, I can't believe you did fill in the blank. So he now knows that social shame is a weapon and a tactic that he'll just, you know, you kind of expect it, but it doesn't matter. There's something that you want to combat. There are no sacred cows, so he'll go right at it. So part of that included David Hogg tweeting various things about gun control, and Owen doesn't hold back.
Yeah, David Hogg was being rolled out to take people's guns, and I said, quote unquote, if you're not old enough to grow pubes, you can't tell men that they can't own guns. And I had 125,000 Twitter followers, and they banned me for life. They banned Owen Benjamin, my backup, and yeah, and they just nuked it. And Joe Rogan was silent, as he always is, when it comes to anything actually important. And so the Bears had my back, and it was awesome. But because all these things, it reveals reality. It reveals that there is an agenda. It reveals that, you know, you almost have to have a guy live through these trials and tribulations to really show people reality. Where it's like, there is an agenda. Like, that's absurd. They said I was sexualizing a child. This is coming from people that actually sexualize children.
I didn't really know too much regarding the Twitter banning because I myself am not on Twitter. I could tell you from my point of view as Owen's wife, though, being banned from Twitter was a blessing in disguise because he became too addicted to it. He was constantly on Twitter and couldn't help himself to not engage with like little debates because he just loves to debate. So I thought it was like a sign being like, you're done with Twitter. Now you can't go back on it. And it actually was almost a breath of fresh air for him too, in a way where I think he felt out of a cloud. I think he got really immersed in it for a little bit. And although he lost that way to communicate with people, I think it was a good thing because it got him off his phone a little bit more.
So the same day that Owen lost his Twitter, his verified account got completely deleted. He also got a strike on YouTube, which took away his ability to live stream for, I believe, a month. It could have been 3 months. But indirectly also took away the super chats because those are donations that happen while you're live. So if you can't be live, you can't make money that way.
There's some of those big moments when you realize how personal the culture war gets. And I don't know if these people at like Right Wing Watch and all these people, I know they must understand it, but it's like when they ban me from Twitter and when they demonetize me and all that stuff, it's like I couldn't, like it would affect my ability of feeding my family. And it's like, dude, because I'm saying that transgender children is a form of child abuse, you're now taking away my ability to be a father. And that's like number one in my book. And so when that really hits you of like, these people hate me, like they hate me. It's not a game. It's not like trolls and all. It's like these people are trying to they're trying to kill my family. I had to figure out how to authentically, not fake it, not branding, but like how I could have a great time. You know, no one's having more fun than us is very important, because it's like they're not going to take our ability to feel joy, our ability to have children, our ability to provide for our children. They will get nothing from us ever again. And there will be no pain that they can suckle from. And there will be no loss of innocence that they can parasitically eat from. They will get nothing from me ever again. And not only will I survive, I will thrive. Not only are we fighting, we're enjoying it too. Like, we like it. Be like, put us in a foxhole. You know, like, ban me. It's like, try. We'll like, unauthorized, it's like, we'll beat you, we'll invent something better. And it's like, the more, that's what really strikes terror into the enemy is, it's like, the more they try and take away from us, the more we have to take from them. And the war is not physical. The war is not bullets. It's none of that. The war is spiritual. And it's like, if you want to bash me, I will show you an image of a person thriving, full of love, full of joy, full of life. And it'll get to the point where every pejorative they use against me, people will want to be it. Where if they say, oh, this is a racist, bigot, homophobe, I want to get to the point where people say, wow, bigotry sounds great. Tell me more about this whole thing. You know, I want people, like when Vice News said that I had a brain worm, one of the coolest things that I saw is someone said, underneath a picture of my family and me having a blast, someone said, I want a brain worm. Like, I want them to eat their own words. And the only way to do it is thriving in this world of despair. I want people to step back and say, who would I rather be? One of these little bloggers in the basement, you know, just trying to destroy something great, or I want to be great. I want people to want to be great again. And the good thing that came from it is sometimes when you see evil is when you really see God. When you see how evil human beings can be is when you think that there must be a God that created you in love, because if not, we wouldn't have a fight. It would just be evil.
One of the biggest lessons, and notable for me personally, that I've learned from knowing Owen and working with him is the importance he stresses on when you're in the thick of it, when things are happening, you have to act. And one of the best examples of that is when somebody is either being deplatformed or somehow silenced, or something has happened where they have gone from here to here, that he immediately has their back. In that he actually, not just him, but he expects everyone to circle the wagons for that individual. One of the examples was when Alex Jones was being kicked off the various platforms. We were in the middle of the Persona Non Grata tour, and Owen made it a priority for us to go to the InfoWars studio and show solidarity with Alex, because that was the moment Alex needed for people to do that. Not just Owen, but Owen believes that everyone should do that, but as a individual, he will be a person to do that. Another example was when Gavin, Sierra TV was bought out by Blaze, and they let Gavin McKinnon go. Owen made it a big deal to immediately, publicly, have Gavin's back, which he did. So when, for example, Owen had his YouTube completely deleted, the individuals who publicly stated in the moment when it was the most vital time, made statements about it, was something that he not only won't forget but appreciates. And in the moments like that, when people don't stand up, the silence can be deafening. And it's similar when it's, whether it's individuals or it's a community, how important it is for that community to have the back of the members of the community, whether it's all the comics defending one comic who's in trouble for a joke, or when Owen's Twitter was deleted and the people who used to talk to him would ghost him and wouldn't reply anymore. Those kinds of things are notable, because that's the moment you need people, and that's the moment people should step up. Owen puts a high priority on truth. It's what guides him, in his development as a person, that he's always looking for truth. And he is the kind of person that when presented new information that disproves previous information he had, he will jump headlong into it. Some people will double down, and when faced with the reality that something they believed before was not true, they won't hear it. They just put their fingers in their ears. Owen is the opposite of that. He's like, oh, thank you for telling me that. I was going to think this other wrong thing. And then he'll value that person. But he will continue that process. And if that person hangs on to something that is invalid, Owen can't go with something he knows to be not true. So a good example, Owen, while he was in Hollywood still, began to listen to Steven Crowder, and Steven Crowder would make valid points to negate some of his previous viewpoints. And he held Crowder in high regard for that, because he was grateful that he could grow as a person by hearing new information that he found to be valid. And then would reach out to Crowder, would be on his show, and then subsequently became friends. Well, Owen continues on that process of always looking for truth, and when he found the line of something that Crowder wouldn't be okay with, or Crowder wanted Owen to be the company man and don't question this topic, or don't talk about this, or don't talk about that, Owen can't not do that. So that is kind of how that transitioned. That was the genesis of how that relationship evolved to what it is today, because there were certain things that Crowder won't move on despite clear evidence to the contrary.
I think comedy's good training for that, because you have to be able to burn the dead wood, or else you won't be a good comedian. You know, like if I can work so hard on one song, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And so the irony of a lot of comedians is a lot of them have these giant egos where they're like, they think they're awesome. And it's like, if you humble yourself to the truth and say, that joke doesn't work, and you bail on it, it trains you to be like that with everything. Where you're like, well, it turns out I'm against abortion. And all the horror, you know, and some people are like, oh, you're just saying that because of an audience. It's like, dude, my family are college professors. It's like, I faced more backlash than most people can possibly imagine for what I believe. And it's like, if you give up the truth, or what you believe to be true, you're done. Like, you're just dead in the water. And that's why when I say I might be wrong but I'm not lying, and people really like that, it's because you can't line up with everybody on everything. And so why even bother trying? You know, that means the person's a brand, and that means it's all a lie. It's to sell you something. And I think the fact that I'm not trying to sell people anything is big. I had to learn that these people exist. Like Crowder, I thought was great, you know, because I didn't know about these branded personalities. Like, I understood Fox, I understood CNN, but I didn't understand doing that as a person. Like, that you could be a brand as a person, you know? And so when he told me I wasn't allowed to talk about the moon landing or stuff like that, I'm like, but you're a person. Like, TBS had a brand when I was on there, you know? It's like, we don't do this or that. I'm like, that makes sense. That's a corporation. That's a corpus. It's a body with no heartbeat, but a person. And then I realized that all these people that had my back, it wasn't because of truth. It was because I fit their agenda. You know, like when Ben Shapiro and Steven Crowder and Dennis Prager and those guys all loved me, it was because I was a Hollywood guy going against their enemies. And so then as soon as they realized that I was thinking and speaking for myself, they all turned on me first, every one of them. And so when people think that I'm this hater, no, I just finish it. I start nothing, finish everything. Where it's like, I'm not going to start that beef, but if you start it with me, I will make sure that you know, I got a round in both lungs, heart, and brain, because you're not going to get up and you're not going to shoot me ever again. And so when these people would do that stuff, and they would publicly distance themselves from me and make it seem like I was crazy after I just done their videos, I wrote half of Crowder's funny stuff, and then he's going to like right when he's needed, he distances and he says, "Oh, I can't associate with him." He did the same thing with Gavin. It's like, I'm gonna make sure that you can't breathe or think or run. Like, you're my enemy now.
There's a helpful concept that he's talked about, but that kind of helps illustrate even more like how he got where he is, but also why people that he used to click with, it seems like he doesn't click with anymore. And he would talk a lot about there being two towers, one of truth and one of power. From a certain perspective, they look like they're the same. So when he moved to Crowder, because it looked like Crowder was being truthful, Crowder was giving him his perspective, which was more information that seemed valid to him relative to where he was. But Crowder wasn't about, or, you know, the expression, a broken clock is right twice a day. There were probably some things that Crowder, or there were things that Crowder would say that are truthful. I mean, abortion's bad, you know, whatever. But those people who are adherents to political alliances, or you know, they want to be a media whatever and make money, that's not truth. And even in that moment, it seems like they're aligned because of the direction. The truth is going to continue to go because these people are like, no, this is who we are. So in terms of like right wing and conservative, that's a political alignment. And I don't think, even when he was on the left, which I don't think he would argue he was, but he was in Hollywood. He's to me apolitical. He goes where the truth is, and there is some truth on the left. There is some truth on the right, politically, because truth is just truth. It's, you know, so even if it was a four-dimensional political alignment, he's gonna rub people the wrong way if they're the type of person who won't move from their set of views that contradict the truth. So as I was pointing out before, where time and time again Owen will find somebody who has valuable information that he then values because they gave him something that gave him some kind of insight he didn't have before. And he is never deterred by, you know, like when he first was in Hollywood and he's like, oh, let me check out Steven Crowder. They're like, oh, you don't want to see that guy because of whatever. I don't care. So along the way, Owen discovered Vox and, you know, learned a lot from his videos. And I'm not entirely sure how he reached out to him. At some point they became in contact, and a lot of that stuff I didn't know, and they were working on stuff behind the scenes. And they started partnering on things, and with Vox, a lot of things go into development and they don't announce it until it's ready. So Unauthorized got announced early because of the demonetization. It wasn't part of the plan. But that's where that kind of, they had already been working on that business relationship. I believe also through Arcaven Comics, Vox was able to publish Owen's book that he couldn't get published before. And that was the beginning of their partnership.
That's insanely bizarre to hear that, but thank you guys, that's awesome. Before we do get started, I want to thank the crew. This is our last show on the tour, and they've been crushing it. And I especially want to thank all you guys for coming out, so give yourselves a huge round of applause.
And I love hanging out with pilots because, you know, I'm always trying to get somebody to fly me to Antarctica. Like, I'm obsessed with Antarctica. And whenever I'm hanging out with pilots, I'm always like, yeah, so why don't we just go to Antarctica? And they're just like, yeah, easy with the conspiracy theory stuff. And I'm like, hey, I came here for the altitude, not the attitude. If that doesn't make you laugh, you're dead inside. You can use that on any plane with any of those like bitchy stewardess guys. It's like, can I get another cup of coffee? It's like, wait. It's like, I came here for the altitude, not the attitude, bro. And they're like, we don't take kindly to you non-sodomites. That was an intense feeling. I'm just talking, and it was just like heaven opens up. I'm like,
one very noteworthy thing that occurred on this tour that's never happened before was every one of the shows requested an encore. And encores in comedy are a little bit different than encores in music. And it's especially different when you do encores when you have a comedian who does music. Because there's a certain high note, no pun intended, that you leave a show on that, you know, it's probably one of your best bits, if not your best bit, and you usually leave it strong when that's what you're used to doing. And we didn't expect the encore request in Portland. And then after you've done stand-up and then you move to the piano, you can't then do stand-up again. I think that's kind of awkward. So then it's like, what do you do on the encore? Because this wasn't planned. You know, what do you play? Do you do a full bit? So, you know, he, you know, handled it perfectly, obviously, but that was interesting. And then we didn't know if the encore thing would happen every night, if it was just a Portland event. And in Idaho was the only show he wasn't able to do the encore because he didn't know was gonna happen again, and he had already exited the back of the venue to go around to the front for photos. So people were still cheering for encore, and he didn't know it. And he's up at the front ready to take photos while they're still cheering for him. So unfortunately, Idaho was the only show he couldn't do an encore for. And I think if we would have known it was happening every night, he probably would have waited. So for Indiana, he waited, and then there was an encore. And for Ohio, he waited, and there was an encore. I'm wondering if that'll be a thing every show from now on, because it just kind of caught on. But yeah, Idaho, unfortunately, he wasn't able to do it. He didn't know. He was literally walking around the building while people were yelling for him to come back. So.
thank you, Mansfield, Ohio. I love you guys. I'm Owen Benjamin. Get home safe. Be fruitful and multiply. Don't be fruity and blow a guy. Good night, everybody. That nigger stole my bike! I really need my bike! Can't work without a bike! Stole my bike. Good night. Thank you. Get home safe.
So we were in Saranac Lake for about a year and a half, and then we did Owen's show there, and just seeing the town react the way they did, it just did not make it worth living in such a remote village that was small, you know, so far from my family. There was too many cons at that point to stay. So we had it in the back of our mind that we were going to move the following fall. At the time, we were pregnant with Charlie, and we had booked some shows. We booked a tour for like the Seattle area, Portland area, and Walter and I were going to fly with Owen so I could visit family. And while we were out here visiting, and I had gone to the Portland show with Owen, I ended up having a pregnancy complication where I started to bleed, and I got to the hospital and the doctor said, you know, you need to lay low. We don't know, you know, if you're going into early labor, but there's a chance because of, you know, these symptoms. So while we were here, I got put on bed rest in Portland for I think 5 days. And Owen and I were just like, this is a sign, we need to just stay here. So I ended up never flying back to Saranac Lake. I just stayed on the West Coast with my family. Walter and I stayed at my parents' house for a solid month while we transitioned, and Owen went home, got our dogs, stayed there for like a week or two, getting everything lined up, hanging out with his brother a little bit, like one last time in the same city, which was absolutely devastating that they like had to move away from each other. So it was just heart-wrenching on Owen to move away from his brother, but he knew it was, you know, best for our family. And then he drove across country with all 4 dogs, with the car packed, and got here in like record time, like I think under 50 hours. We were just nervous he was gonna miss the birth of Charlie, and he missed the birth of Walter, so we just could not have that happen. So the doctors, you know, they were telling me, you know, you could go into labor kind of like any moment, so you gotta like lay low. So I was just trying to lay low on my parents' couch while Owen was getting here, you know. And then luckily we got this house and clothes and moved in time for Charlie's birth. We were sleeping on an air mattress, and we had like a pack and play for Charlie, but we at least had our own space. And yeah, it was just nice to feel kind of settled. We found our current Ursa Manor when I was in the hospital, so I actually never saw the house in person until after we'd made an offer on it. Owen and my mom had come and saw it, and just both of their opinions, like they look at totally different things. Like Owen's all about the land. My mom, you know, looks for a nice home, kitchen, you know, so I knew when they both signed off on it, I was like, oh yeah, let's get it. So we got it, and we got this house, and we couldn't have lucked out. Like our neighbors are just absolutely amazing. And I, at the time when we first got it, I definitely did not see its potential the way Owen did.
Well, as soon as we came out here, we had this land, but it was all wild. And I was in a pretty paranoid state of mind at the time because when you get kicked out of like online banking, you realize how under the thumb you can be with these people. And so I wanted to be able to grow our own food because I know about Ukraine. And I didn't have any skills, and neither did Amy, but we had a couple chickens in Saranac Lake, but we wanted to really make it so that we could eat our own food. And so I didn't know how to build a fence either, but Amy's grandpa did. Amy's grandpa, Walter's great-grandpa, and he helped teach me how to build a fence, 82 years old. And so I just went crazy with it. And all the money I made on YouTube, I put towards the fence and the gardens and the greenhouse and stuff. And it was wonderful. Just to spend all my time like learning something I didn't know how to do that was so constructive.
So one of the most important things when you're facing adversity is to A, not let it affect you too much, but B, also keep moving forward. And a lot of the adversity that Owen faced in terms of demonetizations and, you know, being kicked off PayPal and all these things is something he took very seriously. And his ability to not only just make an income, but make sure that he can create a sustainable and flourishing environment for his family was a priority. And part of the commitment or you know, grit to just make sure that you're continuing to move forward, I think Owen wanted to build when he felt like things were being taken or that there was a lot of negativity, he was trying to change it into something positive. So it just became about, there are things I can't control and things I can. Well, what can I? I can plant, I can build a fence, I can get some goats. And little by little, he built what is now his homestead through getting through a lot of that, a lot of the things that were happening, but also not letting it be something that would stop you to continue to crush despite the circumstances, or in spite of them, despite of them, either way.
You know, Hollywood's all about development deals that go nowhere. You know, comedy that's dramatic, drama that's comedy that no one watches. Like, to be able to actually see something you make become useful is you know, the Canaanites will never know that. I think the overall thing about the tour was how many just good, genuinely nice people I got to meet, and just the quality of people is just so much better than my comedy club days. A lot of those people were just, I don't know, they weren't as warm. So I just really enjoyed meeting everybody and having a connection with people where I felt like they actually knew me, and not just from my credits or from my comedy. Like, they actually like knew some of the real highs and lows in my life, and just had a closer relationship with the people in the crowd. Felt awesome. Having people in the crowd that look to me as some of the young men as a role model to like get a wife and kids, and to not have to lie all the time. It's definitely more pressure. It makes me think sometimes about if I'm like spiraling too hard, or if I'm giving bad advice or something, because I'm not just a comedian for some of the people. I'm a role model, and I take that seriously, because sometimes I make horrendous mistakes in my life, or I, you know, just spiral about Grabwurst for way too long. And I'm just like, I hope I'm not putting someone on the wrong path. And so that's why I just hope people know that I'm a flawed man like anyone, and a comedian. And so we're all in this together. The main takeaway, and I think one thing about the Bears in this community that's so good, is it's not making everyone want to be a comedian. It's making everyone want to be what they are. And that's important, where it's like, don't let the fear and the despair keep you from having a family, keep you from pursuing something that scares you.
One expression he uses to describe him relation to the community is that he's just a tent post. There's an expression, meet at the Owen. He's just the tallest guy, but we're all hanging out. And what is being done to him can be done to us. And I kind of saw that early on, that he just pointed out, hey, you shouldn't really be confusing your child on who they are, and you definitely shouldn't give them the kind of drugs that will irreversibly change their body forever. And I've yet to meet anybody who disagrees with that, but Owen sacrificed an entire career based on that statement. And anything that would happen to him as a result of that, to me, I would see as obvious would happen to anyone as a result for speaking out. So to help him is to help yourself. And, you know, it is a community, but it's, you know, all ships rise. Like, we don't want anyone to suffer, and we want everyone to crush, you know?
Well, the beauty of life these days is what's next is that it can be whatever. It's like, the reality is we made a comedy tour happen in a world that had rejected me. When one door closes, you know, a much bigger door opens. And the more these doors closing are inorganic and agenda-driven and lie-driven, the more the response is so legendary. It's like I've had a long and very prosperous and successful career, and I've never in my life had an encore. And in this tour, every show's had an encore. It's like,
this is actually kind of a cool moment for me, because it was one of the first times I had a sense of like, things are gonna be okay no matter what, despite the obstacles and things that get thrown our way with various deplatformings. But someone once wrote, I think it was after somehow his ability to receive super chats on YouTube was taken away, and we were doing PayPal, and someone wrote, if we have to send you money through the mail, we'll do it. And I remember thinking, I was like, wow, like our community is so just dedicated to not being stopped and not letting anything hinder us, that whatever, hiccup comes, we're just going to work it through.
When I was hanging with Brandon in Idaho, and we're talking about how, growing your own food and being so tactically good with the guns, it lowers fear, which is the whole point, where if nothing happens, like hopefully nothing happens. Some people, like some of the prepper types that I've met, have this unhealthy desire for everything to fall apart. And I don't have that desire, but the community we've created and the skills that we've acquired make it so I'm not as scared of it happening. Where if something really bad did happen to our supply chains in this country, which is probable, you can be okay. And it's the same with comedy. It's like, yeah, the Improv won't let me perform there anymore. They took down my picture. It's like, but that's all right, because you can't stop people. You can't stop will. You can't stop logos. And you can do a show in an airport hangar. You can do a show in a woodworking building, just because the people in it want something good, and they want something beautiful and symmetrical and true. And it's like, as long as there's a few people that are like that, you can not only survive but prosper. And I think that's what is the real takeaway here is the future is for those who show up.
It's been a lot, and I don't know. I feel, looking back at any part of life, if for anyone, if you kind of know what's involved, it's exhausting, but in the time, it's like you just kind of take it in stride and you just keep going forward. But looking back, it's like, whoa, we've gone through a lot. And it would be exhausting to have to relive it. But it's just, there was parts where I would feel kind of like depleted and rejected and like have a hard time finding time to eat type of thing. But most of it is like, it's just corny, but it's what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And once you have life throw something at you once, you know how to handle it again. And when you get people throwing all sorts of things at you, it's like, now we just are equipped to handle it, and we can outsmart them in the future. The one thing I know for sure is life is unpredictable, and Owen constantly throws things at me where I'm just like totally like, this is off the wall. And then I just get used to it, and then that's like our life now. Like, we went from living in Los Angeles to living in the middle of the Adirondacks, and it just happened, and then it was good. Like, it just like, life just happens, and we just kind of keep going, so.
I think that, as a movie once said, if you build it, they will come. It's very true that there's a lot of people out there that are just waiting for someone to say something true, anything true. And if someone does that, they will support them. And it's very beautiful. And it is, and it's a fact. Sometimes I have a doubtful mind a lot of times, and I wonder what is really true and what isn't true, especially when it comes to the moon. But if you do what you know is right, people will support you, and beautiful things will happen, and the struggles will be seen as fun and not devastating. Like looking back, like just from talking to you about this stuff, it's like looking back at times in my life that should be seen as so hard and painful. I'm very fondly recalling some of these things, like being kicked out of a town, struggling in Hollywood, losing my agent, having my ability to pay my bills taken from me. Like, those things all sound like life-ending despair events, and in reality, it's like I'm smiling thinking about doing tree work after, you know, being the closing act in Carnegie Hall. It's like to know that there's always life around the corner is a great thing. No matter what happens in your life, no matter what obstacles you face, you know, when one paraplegic bear is in a wheelchair and no sight bear is blind, and we're all talking about like, what's it like to be blind or in a wheelchair or banned from like your job's like, we're still here, you know? It's like no matter what happens, you can still crush. And as long as you don't lie to yourself and lie to other people, it just seems like life keeps giving you chances.
There was a good quote made by Jim Bob. I think it was on Instagram. After one of the many things that Owen was deplatformed from, someone tagged him and said, hey, are you going to comment on the fact that Owen lost, whatever it was? And he said, that guy has the amazing ability to Houdini himself out of hell consistently, so he'll be fine. I think that was a pretty good summary of everything that seems to be a setback inevitably becomes a blessing.
Before I met the Big Bear, the leftists used to drink my tears. Then for a while, I kind of got into drinking leftist tears. And then, you know, all of a sudden now I don't need any tears because I got all the tears I can handle right here.
I just want to give a little shout out to Owen Benjamin and the Unbearable community, and the Bear Stream has been such a positive impact on my life.
I don't really have a community where I live that is like the Bears, but it's encouraging to know that there's people all over the world that are on the same path, that are building and growing and learning together. And
I've been through things that only the Bears could have ever gotten me through, and I thank God every day for them.
The honesty of this community, that's kind of what draws you in.
Bears are probably the most supportive people that I've ever come across.
All the Bears have just, you know, really helped me be a better person.
It's far more positive here. There's far more benefit than not. So I just keep coming back. I keep coming back for the humor, information, finding new people to listen to and experience.
You gave me the balls to finally quit my job and stay home with my children and raise them, which is something I've always wanted to do. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
So I'm just truly grateful for him and the Bear community.
I am very grateful and very thankful for the Bear community. It's real. It's just the realest people.
I haven't found anything else like it, and I hope it just continues on for years and years. I will always be coming back. So thank you, and I'm looking forward to whatever's coming next.